But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Hello, Adam. How you doing? If you missed last night, do check out the VOD. We were watching Jank from the Young Turfs talking about how it is extremist maximalism for trans people to want to keep the rights they've had for decades, and how the Democrats totally would have won in 2024 if they had just had a campaign that was just like the one that lost them to the election. It was a real masterpiece of retconning. Definitely worth checking out. Hey, bonsoir, Adrien. And in case you missed it, I now have a dedicated Instagram for the Inessa Armand translation project, and for the crowdfunded translation project in general. I'm just going to drop that link in chat. Now, got a number of options here, but I thought, well, there's a nice little short one here. Apparently, Caleb Muppet. Yum. Okay, that sounded really weird. I was responding to what Adria said in chat about the baguettes, but it just sounded like I said Caleb Muppet yum, and no, Caleb Muppet not yum. Well, so he's decided to do film criticism of Nosferatu, which I haven't seen. It's a short one. I thought, why don't we kick it off that way?
Hey folks, so I saw the new Nosferatu movie, which is a remake of the 1922 classic vampire film.
Well, he's such a great filmmaker. It's great that we have somebody like this doing film criticism. I mean, the way he got that sunlight totally, front lighting his face, backlighting his face a little bit, so all of us had to, cover our eyes just now. I mean, this guy, yes, that's true. I secretly have a thing for Caleb. And actually, I have to say, the real victim in the Young Turfs fash turn is Caleb Maupin. Because the thing is, Jenk will be better at it. Jenk will achieve what Caleb has been trying to, and it will suck. But it won't be Caleb doing it, because Caleb isn't as good at it.
Silent movie, and I had a few thoughts to share with you.
Ooh, he had thoughts. I mean, again, see, totally just bold cinematographic choice here, completely ignoring the rule of thirds, cutting off the top of his head. Why does he always, film this shit while he's walking down the street? Why?
First of all,
it's New York, there's tons of fucking people walking on the pavements. You maybe pay attention to that.
Whenever I watch any film, I often say to myself, what is this film really saying? I remind people that films tend to say a lot more about the time period in which they're made and current events than they say about the time period they depict. So as I was watching Nosferatu, I was thinking, what are they saying about our time?
Well, I mean, just so deep.
And what became clear to me was that it was very much a reflection on the mental health crisis in U.S. society. It's about...
Nosferatu is a reflection on the mental health crisis of society. Like, I haven't seen the new Nosferatu.
The shame of mental health issues, the stigma on people, perhaps even a little bit of a reflection.
Hey, motherfucker, you talking about the stigma of mental health issues? His book on BreadTube, he actually, like, shames Thought Slime for being open about his mental health issues and stuff.
On drug addiction. The plot revolves around kind of a goth girl character who conjured up a spirit when she was a teenager. Then she met the love of her life, got...
Are we gonna see Pizza Jork?
Married, and the vampire that she conjured up, this spirit from Romania, showed
Hello, Gingery.
up to destroy her marriage as an adult. What also stuck out to me as interesting is that if you read the original Dracula novel,
He's okay, now he's just making me
Dracula
fucking
is pretty
seasick.
great. It is very good looking. He's very handsome.
Okay. So, Caleb's jealous of Dracula.
He's very physically fit. This was almost a weird caricature of Eastern European folks at the time. At the time, Eastern Europe was considered to be very wild and exotic, and Dracula was this very, very good-looking, very, very...
Like, I mean, wouldn't you want to talk not so much about Bram Stoker's Dracula as, like, the original fucking Nosferatu if you're going to be making these comparisons? Like, obviously, I haven't seen the film, but I'm guessing that the reason they're calling it Nosferatu is they kind of want people to think of it as another take on Nosferatu specifically.
Sexual vampire creature from Transylvania. In the 1922 horror film,
Not Sylvania.
the classic silent film Nosferatu,
That looks like Quark!
the Dracula vampire character is anything but good looking. He's this deformed, ugly, scary looking creature. What I thought was interesting is that while
That's a fucking cockerel.
they maintained more or less the 1922 image of Nosferatu, the kind of ugly vampire, they made him sexual, and they played up the sexual aspects of
Like the fingernails?
the vampire story and of the Dracula stories.
I mean, anyone who was here, might have been like a year ago now, when we were watching Caleb Muppet talk about the original Dracula novel, knows when he thinks about vampires, he thinks sex.
So, at the same time that the vampire was ugly, he was also sexual. The vampire hunter character, the Van Helsing character, was played by William Dafoe. And that's what made me think that, again, this was about the mental health crisis.
Wait. So, the idea is that because Nosferatu wasn't good looking, but also turned Caleb on, and Willem Dafoe was the Van Helsing character that... What?
Because William Dafoe's character, who is the vampire hunter, who's supposed to be this expert on vampires, comes across as like a
That's usually what a vampire hunter is.
caring shrink, who cares for the young woman who's been targeted by the vampire, offers her compassion, etc. One aspect of the original film was that there's a lot of images of rats, and that many people have said that the rats, they almost kind of speak to some like desire for cleanliness, a desire to oppose any contagion, a view of people as dirty that kind of played into the German spirit, maybe fed into the rise of fascism, etc. So overall, I felt that this was...
This is, again, this is very just incoherent. Okay, so
an attempt by Hollywood to reflect on the mental health crisis in U.S. society, to touch on the shame and the stigma of mental
Motherfucker, you stigmatize mental health issues.
illness and drug addiction through a vampire story. They used an old classic 1920s German horror film. They redid it.
He did edit this, and yet it still does not flow.
Pulled elements from the vampire genre overall and mixed it in with the German expressionism and the images from the German 1922 film. It was quite enjoyable, and it certainly had something to say.
It was like, but you didn't actually say.
What does independent and unaligned mean?
Oh, okay. This just jumped right on here. Yeah, I mean, he just sort of
new Nosferatu movie.
Just turns on the camera and trusts his luck.
1922.
No, shut the fuck up. We already heard this.
The silent movie.
Ons hat al gehoord. Okay, so we got a number of options here. One of them as just automatically showed up, even though I hadn't asked it to. Anna Transphobian also went on the channel of this jabroni who Jenk went on that we were watching recently, and she's doing the politically homeless grift that was popularized by Tim Pool, and so that's an option. Speaking of Tim Pool, we've got Tim Pool slams TikTok over Chinese manipulation and influence pushing woke ideology to destroy the U.S. Other than that, we've actually also got Jenk gave a speech, a true bedshitter, they say, at Turning Point USA, sucking up to neo-Nazis, and we've got the full speech here. Check that out, since we've been on a bit of a Jenk kick. So, any particular preferences? Oh, we've also got Caleb Muppet talking with George Galloway, the guy who recently said "fuck Arabs," and had actually kind of been low-key saying that for a while, and is the head of his own sort of personal vanity party, the Workers' Party, which is supposed to combine sort of English nationalism with transphobia and like a little bit of social democracy as a side. So it's sort of a national socialist party. And he's going to be having a chat with George Galloway about Biden's legacy and hope for peace under Trump. And it's like, I can't decide who actually looks worse in that. Is that worse for Galloway that he's giving this like douchey fucking cult leader that isn't even a particularly successful cult leader a platform? Or does it look worse for fucking Caleb that he's like decided to share a platform with the ego monster fucking Galloway? I'm not actually sure. But okay, yeah, why not? It's a relatively short one. We may be able to get more than one thing in there.
Well, it looks as if, unless the hand of God reaches out at the 11th hour and 59 minutes, that Joe Biden is going to make it until the end of his presidential term.
Okay. I mean, fun fact about George Galloway. He once threatened to sue people for not voting for him. I mean, literally, this guy, man, is still, eating out on the fact that back when very few people in the U.S. had heard of him, he had spoken out against the Iraq War, and people thought that meant he stood for things. And the thing is, he does stand for a thing. He stands specifically for George Galloway and the care and feeding of George Galloway, and making sure that George Galloway is constantly someplace in front of a camera.
Tonight, what his legacy is for the Middle East, for West Asia as a whole? Well, everything in life depends on how you look at it. From my point of view, Joe Biden is damned forever. Will go into the history books for one thing and one thing only: having armed, funded, facilitated, diplomatically protected, and foghorned his support for a Holocaust, for...
I mean, he's not wrong there. It's kind of interesting to see George Galloway talking about a Holocaust, because he has previously talked about what wonderful people Holocaust deniers are. Like, fucking Israel Shamir and fucking Gilad Atzmon. So when he's saying that it's a Holocaust, does he mean it happened or it didn't happen? You never know.
A genocide which continues.
I mean, he's not wrong about Biden's legacy. That is it. Like, Biden coming into the White House had a great future behind him. And he decided the thing that he wanted to dedicate his last years in the public eye and probably on the earth to was the extermination of Palestinians. I mean, and that's the thing with a lot of these jabronis. Like, fucking Caleb is the same. They'll say, you know, some, like, fairly middle-of-the-road, innocuous leftist sentiment, and the naive will sort of fall for that, and before you know it, he's putting some real fast shit in there, too.
Very moment. Joe Biden made it all possible. Netanyahu's a gangster and a killer, of course. But Joe Biden is a bigger gangster and a far bigger killer, because none of the murders of...
I mean, again, not wrong.
Hundreds of thousands of people and the maiming and mutilation of hundreds of thousands more would have been possible but for Joe Biden, who said almost 50 years ago in the American Senate, if Israel didn't exist, America would have to invent it.
I mean, and the thing is, the U.S. did kind of invent it. Like, Israel post-1967 is very much a U.S. creation.
Well, of course, the British did invent it and handed their invention over to the United States. So, in that circumstance...
They didn't so much hand it over. See, the thing is, again, he's an English nationalist, which is a weird position for a Scot. But, I mean, he manages to take all sorts of weird-ass positions, so it's kind of innocuous. But, I mean, Britain didn't hand it over to the U.S. Britain was just simply no longer in a position to hold on to the empire after World War II, because they had to fight a war on two fronts and they got wrecked. Like, they didn't hand it over. It was they actually were very reluctant about it. And if you read internal records of like Foreign Office and shit from the 1940s, the late 40s, they're talking about, yeah, I mean, we're kind of stuck with it. There's nothing we can do about it. We're forever going to be second fiddle to the Yanks after this.
Not entirely wrong. The empire did invent it, and they invented it for very obvious purpose: to keep the Arabs and the wider Muslim world divided and weak, the better to steal their things. An aircraft carrier, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. called Israel, fortress.
Like, there are lots of people who have actually referred to it as an aircraft carrier, but, I mean, other than fucking RFK Jr., and one of the interesting things about a lot of the other people who've described it that way is that, unlike RFK Jr., they have not claimed that COVID's a Jewish conspiracy.
A little Jewish Ulster in the Middle East, said the British cabinet member responsible for the Balfour Declaration.
I mean, he was also that's an accurate, that is an accurate quote. And he was the first British governor of Jerusalem. Jerusalem.
And everything that has flown since. We know why Israel was invented. And we've seen it commit crimes beyond
Where's
numbers
Caleb
and
here?
sometimes beyond the
I'm going to sort of skip ahead.
on television, and a long-time friend and comrade too, and I'm glad to welcome him to have it out with
God,
Galloway.
like this lighting, the lighting is, see, fucking Galloway has studio lighting, and yet it still makes him look like a fucking corpse. Caleb doesn't have that, but I mean, he looks like he's about to address an assembly to talk about why they're not going to be having sex education this year for grade 7.
Caleb, it looks like Biden's going to make it to the end. What would you write as his
Thank you.
his legacy in the Middle East and West Asia?
Well, Joe Biden presided
The Middle East and West Asia? What is that? Like, West Asia is literally another name for the Middle East. The point of the term West Asia is that it sort of removes the imperial gaze from the name of the place, because the reason it's called the Middle East is it's the bit that is near to the imperial core and all that shit. So, I mean, West Asia is the Middle East. It's just another name for it.
For the criminal actions of Israel that the entire world is looking on in utter horror against. And the irony...
Looking on against?
...is that Joe Biden presented himself as being more sympathetic to the Muslims of the world and to the Palestinians than his predecessor, Donald Trump, who is set to replace him. So this was a political blunder. A political failure on...
I mean, in what way? See, I mean, there is an argument to be made geopolitically that this has completely shown, I mean, that it is an absolute disaster in the sense that it has shown up the U.S.'s attack dog in the Middle East as being militarily incompetent. But I don't think that's what he's going for.
On Biden's part, from which he could not recover. And the fact that many Muslim Americans went out to vote for the Green Party and Jill Stein, and a number of Muslim Americans in Michigan went out to vote for Donald Trump, even.
I mean, mostly they either stayed home. In Michigan specifically, that is where they were voting heavily for the Green Party, or just staying home.
That has a lot to do with the fact that he's about to be...
Although, I mean... There's this tendency, and this is a kind of framing that needs to be pushed back on, that to act like it was completely a Muslim thing or an Arab thing to be concerned about the genocide in Palestine. The polls don't bear that out. It was a broad-based thing. Everybody, especially people who were only ever going to vote for Democrats, were appalled by that.
Unemployed.
Was
because
appalled by
it
that.
just could not be a situation where the Democratic Party could count on the Muslim votes. Their hypocrisy, the failure of the Iran nuclear deal, the failure to restart the Iran nuclear deal.
I mean, the point is, and somebody who claims to be an anti-imperialist really ought to be pointing this out, the deal was just a way to intimidate Iran out of peaceful nuclear power development, because literally nobody who's anybody seriously believes that they have a nuclear weapons program. Like, the U.S. intelligence community has said that they don't have one. And that they used to have one until 2003, and then, according to the U.S. intelligence community, the National Intelligence Estimate, they shut that down under diplomatic pressure and have not resumed it. So, like, the deal was already bullshit. I mean, acting like the deal was such a great thing. The deal was just another act of just violent intimidation based on lies. That deal was bullshit to begin with. The U.S. should have just fucking left Iran alone, but the U.S. won't do that because they're still pissed off that Iran isn't still being ruled by the fucking Shah.
Was something Joe Biden had hinted he wanted to do. A complete failure in the Middle East. While Biden was focused on escalating international tensions around the world. So the Biden administration has failed internationally.
Okay, but failed at what? You can't just say something's a failure without saying what the objective was. Yeah, in his campaign rhetoric, he said some stuff about, bringing back the Iran deal and all that stuff. Also, es gibt kein Abkommen. Israel hat schon angekündigt, sich nicht dran halten zu wollen. Der Netanyahu, let me just switch to English, because this, in case people haven't been following it, Giga M was asking what I think about the deal that the U.S. and Israel supposedly accepted after leaving it on the table contemptuously since December 2023. That is when this deal was first offered by the Palestinians. And the latest is that Netanyahu has said that he got assurances from both Biden and Trump that he can just pretend he can just violate it at will. So it looks like it's just going to be 40, maybe at best 46 days of respite and then a resumption of the genocide. That is what it's looking like right now. But are you going to talk about something, like he said, it was talking about like the Iran deal and everything like that, and leaving aside what the Iran deal actually was, like, you can't measure politicians by the bullshit they say in campaigns. You have to actually look, if you want to understand what politicians are likely to do, what a government is likely to do, you have to actually look at what the ruling class is facing. And what the ruling class was facing in 2020 was a very aroused population, a historic mass militant uprising against police terror, and just massive discontent at the just shitty state of everything. And they needed to just basically wipe clean the slate and get rid of, and make sure that they're, destroy the entire legacy of that uprising, because that's the sort of shit that scares the hell out of them. And of course, after Trump actually, in various ways, took a more escalating stance than the Democrats had, the Democrats decided to just sort of piggyback onto that. And I think on a certain level, it actually does not really make sense to speak too much about rational objectives, because I think on a certain level, there is very much a bit of sort of the wounded empire that falling apart and just sort of striking out wildly in this. But you can't just say it's a failure because it isn't consistent with his fucking campaign rhetoric.
They failed when it comes to addressing the Israel-Palestine conflict. They revealed...
Well, addressing is a broad term. And clearly the objective was... Biden, I've said this before, with the normalization thing, the whole idea that Biden had up until October 2023 was to run the Middle East as if, there were no Palestinians. And then it turned out you couldn't do that because there still were Palestinians, and it turned out Palestinians could actually seriously throw a spanner in the works and utterly humiliate the Israeli army. And so, there was clearly a decision to just, if they couldn't pretend there were no Palestinians, the next best thing is just for there to be no Palestinians. And they've acted very consistently with that for, 16 long months.
Feel themselves to just be blatantly under the domination and control of Israel.
No, that's bullshit. The domination and control of Israel. The U.S. could shut down Israel with a fucking phone call.
At the same time, they failed domestically. People are looking at the wildfires raging across Los Angeles and the devastating situation.
Wait, he's going to talk about climate change? Usually he says that people who talk about that are Malthusians.
There, people are looking at the U.S. economy where the wages Americans are paying are nowhere near enough to cover the cost of everyday goods among Biden's inflation policies. Joe Biden is going to be remembered as not a successful president.
I don't know, not a fan of Biden. I think I've made it very clear. But I don't think it's entirely accurate to just say it's Biden's inflation policies, incidentally, any more than it is reasonable to just attribute to Biden the very slight uptick in real wages in 2024. Nee, der Netanyahu ist eben ein getreuer Diener. Und der tut eben, was ihm geheißen wird. But, like, the reason that there was that little tiny uptick in wages is simply that workers were fed up, and this was referred to in all sorts of, like, breathless headlines as the labor shortage and stuff. But what it was a shortage of workers who wanted to expose themselves to a fucking pandemic, working for employers who had made it clear that their lives meant nothing to them, on the same shitty terms that they'd been doing it. I mean, and the inflation is very much simply the result of, like, well, capitalism. That's the lower, you have a falling rate of profit. You have capitalists wanting to maintain profit, so they put the prices up. That's and massively increase profits. Now, it's true that Biden didn't really seriously do much to stop that, much less to reverse it. He did basically fuck all on that. But I think that would have happened one way or another.
Convince the American people to elect Kamala Harris, his vice president. Donald Trump is set to take the White House on January 20th.
Now, why did he do that, Caleb?
Why did who do what?
Everybody, I think, agrees. He has further isolated the United States in world opinion as the armorer and financer of this genocide. His policy towards Lebanon, towards Syria, towards Iran has alienated the United States from all but the most supine slave in the Arab and Muslim world. Why?
Which it's worth noting is pretty much the main. I mean, what he's describing there is just the numerous client states in the region. And the thing is, you can't say this as if, like, the U.S. had been popular in the Arab-Iranian region before, because they weren't. The U.S. hasn't been popular there in a very long time. Like, Eisenhower was complaining about how the, like, ordinary people in Arab countries were, like, completely distrusted the U.S. And he didn't understand why it was that the U.S. was so unpopular there. So it's not like the Arab public was enamored with the U.S. to begin with.
Did he do that? And was he wise from his own standpoint to do it? After all, if
this is already too complex for fucking Caleb.
Western Empire, I suppose you could argue everything possible must be done to support it.
Well, when it gets down to it, Joe Biden is just a symbol of the corrupt American status quo. The Democratic Party...
As opposed to Donald Trump, like, his guy. There's nothing... You would never associate him with fucking corruption.
Has long been the party of the corrupt urban political machines. That's the roots of Joe Biden's...
Urban. That's a neat little dog whistle. I haven't heard that in a bit.
He's been in politics his entire life. He comes from a powerful political family. His son, Hunter Biden, has done very, very well financially. He's quite a painter, I understand. He was painting and selling these paintings for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Joe Biden gave his son a complete unconditional pardon for all the various activities that the American people have observed, cash and carry government. And Joe Biden just represents the American status quo.
Well, what, are you about to say that Trump doesn't, though?
Every way. No political bravery, no courage to say no to powerful interests, just the entrenched monopolistic power, and that entrenched monopolistic power is tied in with Israel. Israel is part of the corrupt American political establishment that has made Joe Biden a key...
Wait, a second ago he was saying that the U.S. was enthralled to Israel, which is something that people do when they're trying to combine the two passions of anti-Semitism and whitewashing the U.S. record in the world.
Key figure in American politics for decade after decade after decade. So the idea that Joe Biden would stand up and say, no, what Israel's doing has got to stop, that's not going to happen. Now, what's interesting is we're being told constantly in the United States that Donald Trump is so selfish. He's so selfish.
Well, I mean, one of the people who tells us that is Donald Trump, who puts his name all over every fucking thing.
I hope that's true, because I would like to have a president who's more concerned with how he's remembered in the history books than he is with being a team player for Empire. And that seems...
Well, except that he is a team player for Empire. Hey, River Rune, how you doing?
...the real fear about what Donald Trump might be as a president.
Well, it might be. We've already seen what he is. We were already here.
There's talk that Donald Trump is trying to be Ronald Reagan. His statement...
is that a good thing, though?
The podium about returning the hostages, he's hoping that just as the Iranian hostages, the American hostages held...
Yeah, this is jabroni stacking, but on the other hand, I don't think it works quite the same way, because they're not in a debate. They're just having a friendly discussion, Where jabroni stacking really doesn't work is when you have jabronis fighting.
Iran will return the very day that Reagan was inaugurated. Donald Trump is hoping...
and there's been question all along, with at least some somewhat hard evidence, indicating that Reagan was trying to... Reagan had actually made overtures to try to get Iran not to return them until after the election, just to, deny Carter that win.
That the hostages held by Hamas will be returned on the very day that he takes office. He's like...
Well, except that's, literally not the deal. The deal, actually, is a phased deal, because the Palestinians know better, and their leadership knows better, than to think that the U.S. and Israel are going to abide by their side of a deal if they get everything they want on day one. So, it is a phased deal. They get some people back. The Palestinians get some people back, and then they negotiate phase 2. That's the idea. And supposedly, as long as the negotiations are going on, Israel is not going to be doing genocide. Although Netanyahu's basically said he doesn't see any reason why he shouldn't.
Trying to repeat history. He wants to be Ronald Reagan once again. And if that happens, Donald Trump will have that to boast about. And he will be almost indebted to Hamas for doing that. He will have seen that they really gave him a favor. So that's something to keep in mind. I will...
Wait, except... who? Wait a second.
Be almost indebted to Hamas for doing that.
Wait a second here. The idea here, Hamas isn't the one who suddenly accepted a deal. This deal has been on the table, waiting for the U.S. and Israel to accept it since December 2023. This thing hasn't ended because Palestinian resistance forces are unwilling to come to terms. It has dragged on this long because the U.S. and Israel have refused to accept any deal.
He will have seen that they really gave him a favor. So that's something to keep in mind. I will say that...
but I can totally see fucking the worst, most annoying liberals saying exactly this and saying, look, fucking Trump is Hamas. And it's like, no, he fucking isn't.
The only way things in the Middle East can really improve under Trump, and this is a hard one because I have a hard time seeing it happening. We know how Trump is, but Donald Trump has got...
Wait a second, you know how Trump... Wait, I mean, he's been, whitewashing Trump's, interventions in Korea, literally on banners.
To apologize for murdering Qasem Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani...
Wait, that's who he should apologize for murdering?
The great Iranian military leader who is...
okay, I mean, yeah, he shouldn't have done that, yeah. But, I mean, it seems like the U.S. has way more to apologize for at this point. And the idea that Trump is the kind of guy who will show up hat in hand and make apologies, is that for, anything at all? Does that sound like a thing?
Murdered by Trump during his first term. Trump has to apologize for that. He has to say he was...
Ooh, yeah, what does it mean that he has to? He's not going to. Why the fuck would he?
fled. He did not understand who Qasem Soleimani
was. What is this fucking headcanon he's coming? Oh, he didn't understand who Qasem Soleimani was. It's like, I think he did. I think that's precisely why he had him killed, actually.
He didn't understand that Qasem Soleimani was a heroic fighter against ISIS who had saved thousands of Christian lives in Syria.
Like, yeah, why, I mean, I understand that he's coming up with some amazing fucking fanfic right here. But, like, why the hell would he do any of this stuff? I mean, apart from everything else, like, can you imagine any U.S. president, but like fucking Trump in particular, getting up there in front of a lectern and saying that he just didn't understand who the guy was? Like, you know, like he's apologizing for taking a shit on somebody's prized duvet that their grandmother fucking sewed for them. Like what the fuck what fucking mental image is this? Does he get spanked afterwards? Is that what happens next? Does, like, Khamenei get to spank him afterwards in your fucking fanfic, Caleb?
Syria on the battlefield, Donald Trump needs to come forward and say, look, I didn't understand what I was doing. I was wrong to kill.
That's because that's such a fucking strong position.
Qasem Soleimani. And if Trump can take that move...
Which he won't. Like, so why the hell are we even bothering with this?
That could be a step toward really improving things in the Middle East. Well,
why the fuck do you think that he's likely to really improve anything? Why do you think any U.S. ruler feels any desire to improve things in the region in any sense that would be at all recognizable to most people, let alone people in the region?
I feel like that's the key thing. Trump must apologize for the murder of Qasem Soleimani.
Who gives a shit? Like,
I'm into that.
Like, why the fuck would he? Wow, Caleb Maupin says I had to apologize for this guy and do it in a way that makes me look like a complete fucking doofus. I guess I'm gonna do that.
Let's move to the Levant, though. They're boasting that they destroyed Syria. I've just been looking at their chat. They say that...
Whose chat?
This is a great achievement of the Biden presidency, to put ISIS and Al-Qaeda into power in Damascus. Having earlier put the Taliban back into power in Afghanistan. It's peculiar, isn't it, when these are the achievements that the Democrats actually vote.
Except the Democrats don't really call the withdrawal from Afghanistan an achievement. In fact, they blame Trump for it. But the thing is, it wasn't that they sort of picked the Taliban to go back in power. It's that the Taliban became like one of the main resistance forces against the occupation in Afghanistan. And so, naturally, they were going to be, like, the heir apparents when the U.S. eventually decided to cut their losses and stop occupying the fucking country.
Boast about?
Indeed. And what's also interesting is that Tulsi Gabbard, who, the former congresswoman from Hawaii, leader of the U.S. military, has been appointed...
Leader of the U.S. military? I don't know that she was that. Was fucking Tulsi Gabbard ever in the Joint Chiefs?
Appointed by Donald Trump to be his intelligence director. And she was on the record warning about the rise in terrorism and about the...
Well, yeah, except when she talks about that, she just means Muslims. Like, she's a huge fan of the fucking, like, fascists in India around Modi. She just hates Muslims generally is the thing.
Devastating consequences of the fall of the Syrian Arab Republic. And the things that she was warning about, for over a decade, they have in a lot of ways come true. And there's a lot of fear that Tulsi Gabbard could come in and challenge.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fear, particularly amongst like the Muslim community that you claimed to give a shit about a minute ago, because she's on the record fucking hating him.
Change foreign policy establishment of the United States, and I think that's a very helpful thing. I hope that Tulsi Gabbard is able to become the intelligence director, because she has said many
because he's a fascist
about how devastating regime change wars are. She's spoken about how the United States government was facilitating these dangerous biolabs in Ukraine. I hope that Tulsi Gabbard ends up, being ratified and receiving the role of intelligence director in the incoming administration.
You can't even get the title right. It's Director of National Intelligence.
Said things about Israel that I certainly don't agree with.
Yeah. Like, this is the thing. This is why this is just so fucking silly. Because if you take a serious look at any of these people, it is impossible to see why he would like any... Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard's so fucking anti-war.
But the fact that she spoke about Syria in the way she did, and said what no one else in the U.S. Congress had the bravery to say at the time when she was representing Hawaii, that's very inspiring to me, and I hope that we can see some real change. It's interesting...
Well, except you're not going to, is the thing. Like, I mean, you're not...
Benjamin Netanyahu, along with Javier Milei, two arch-Zionist supporters, hard-right, Zionist Israel supporters, they'll be attending Trump's inauguration.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the thing is, Javier Milei, whose name he can't seem to pronounce correctly. Oh, well, because Tulsi Gabbard... the reason they like her is because she says some things that are critical of, like, U.S. Foreign policy. And that's basically... Also, she's, like, very anti-queer, and... Well, she's sort of pro-fascist, so they're kind of cool with that. But, like, there is this sort of myth of her being anti-war. But, like, Milei is just a fucking lapdog of the U.S. Extreme... And the fact that, like, somebody like that... Like, who... It's worth noting... Like, his entire thing has been to, like, see just how much poverty he can make happen in Argentina. He's the reason that Argentina has gone from one of the most affordable places to live and best living standards in South America to being a place that has record-breaking fucking prices. Like, I was looking into, like, studying in Buenos Aires, because I love Buenos Aires, and I need to get the fuck out of this country. I don't see this going very well, and I'm kind of, I have to say, also just sick of this country. I mean, even before all this shit started happening, I was already kind of found that I felt much more at home in other places anyway, though there are people, of course, that I miss over here. And so I was like, so I wanted to just get an idea of what kind of budget I would need and if I were going to go and study in Buenos Aires and live there. And I discovered, like, regular ass fucking pasta. Regular ass fucking pasta. There, like, just cheap ass, the cheapest version of, like, Barilla, that sort of thing. For, like, one box of it, it's like the equivalent of $6. It turned out... Like, the prices have gone so through the roof that Argentina is the most expensive place in the world to buy pasta. And given that Argentina is a very Italian-heavy place, that is the sort of thing that really hurts. I mean, the thing about Caleb Muppet is it's hard to say what he understands and what he doesn't and what he's just, like, full of shit about. Because those are fluid categories. He's always selling something. He's always selling a line. And he may be clever enough to realize that that line is bullshit, or maybe he isn't.
But people notice that Donald Trump has also shared information critical of Israel on his social media platforms that has spoken of Netanyahu in quite negative ways.
I mean, yeah, although, again... The Biden administration was constantly leaking stories to, like, especially Barack Ravid over at fucking Axios, which is practically a cutout for the intelligence services. The number of stories that are just an unnamed intelligence source said to, and that's the entire basis of the story. And what the stories that kept on leaking to Barack Ravid were like, Biden is really blowing his stack now. He's really, really pissed off at Netanyahu. They were doing that in order to placate the folks at home and have them think that actually Biden felt the same way looking at the fucking, genocide that they did.
that among Trump's supporters, not among those who control the conservative media outlets that support Trump, but among Trump's rank and file supporters, there's a lot of hostility to Israel.
Except not really. It's, I mean, like, not in the form of any kind of support for Palestinian rights. The reason that Trump supporters, some of them are hostile to Israel, is because they don't like Jews, and they equate Israel and Jews to the same thing. They don't give a shit about Palestinians. They like, if they ran into a Palestinian in their neighborhood, they'd probably shoot them. But they don't like Jews. But Caleb doesn't either.
To your average Trump supporter, America first does not mean Israel first. And we've seen some interesting statements from Vivek Ramaswamy and other figures where they say, okay, we support Israel, but it's not worth sending them our money. We should put America first. They don't need our tax money. They should deal with protecting their own borders. And these kind.
What borders? They literally don't have borders. They refuse to declare what borders they even claim.
Of statements are interesting, and it's a.
No, you know they're not interesting. They don't mean anything. It's like, I mean, this is just dickheads. Like Ramaswamy, the likelihood of him actually getting anywhere near power, like there was that whole Doge thing, which was like sort of the kids' table of the Trump administration. It was going to be this thing where they would occasionally get to say shit, but they didn't get to have any actual authority over anything, because. Like, why would you ever trust anything that matters to either of those motherfuckers? And Trump doesn't particularly like either of... doesn't particularly like Ramaswamy, certainly. But, yeah. But all it is just some offhand remarks from people who are grifting like him.
Easing the fact that the rank and file of the MAGA, Make America Great Again, America First movement that brought Trump to the White House...
That's not what brought Trump to the White House. No fucking... The movement that brought Trump to the White House was the movement of people staying home because Harris disgusted them. People who otherwise probably would have voted for a Democrat just to keep Trump out.
They don't want foreign entanglements like George Washington warned America about. They don't want permanent alliances with countries overseas, and they don't want billions of Americans...
Well, like, where is he getting any of this? Like, he's just making this shit up.
Taxpayer dollars going into foreign conflicts, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's the Middle East.
And it's worth noting, I mean, I always have a lot of side-eye for the people who will, like, point to the amount, the dollar amounts that go to Israel, because the thing is, they are tiny when compared to the overall federal budget, and the money overwhelmingly immediately goes right back to U.S. arms companies, because part of the terms of the aid is that it has to be spent on U.S. manufactured weapon systems.
Now, finally, and you may say it's hardly worth talking about, but I have an interest in it. The Democrats they went for bust. They pushed old Joe off the cliff. They put the most doltish alternative they could find.
I wouldn't say that she was the most doltish alternative. They got some seriously doltish alternatives. I mean, she was certainly like one of the least promising alternatives. But most doltish?
Your masterful biography of Kamala Harris.
God, his masterful biography. It's so masterful. Like, Caleb will talk about... There are books that he wrote a while ago that he'll still bring up. They all suck. I mean, they're all very badly written. But, like, you never hear him... At least I have never heard him talk about that Harris biography. So even he must not be impressed with it.
Which everyone should still read. They put her in. It was a big gamble. They spent, I think, $1.3 billion, even though they're a few $100 million short, I understand.
Well, that's because they spent the money. Like, they actually... A lot of people had this idea that when they saw, like, Alanis Morissette and all these, like, 1990s nostalgia acts at the convention and, campaign events, they thought that they were doing this to support the campaign, but it turns out no, they were getting paid the rates.
Debt Are they finished now? Might they split now? After all,
No, they're not gonna split. Like, what? Like, they do not see this as a failure. I mean, they're using it right now to do the thing that they always try to do when they lose, which is to say, oh, we weren't right-wing enough. Which is really impressive considering that they were, like, courting the favor of literal fucking neo-Nazis this time. But, like, they're fine with this result. They just, I mean, they use it to browbeat, you know, working class people who didn't vote for them and didn't vote for the other prick either. It's worth noting. And to fundraise as if nothing really happened. Like, there's no, he thinks there's going to be a split in the demo. No, there fucking isn't. The U.S. party politics is just not that interesting.
this is a party without any trace of what it was supposed to be. It was, if you like, its DNA was supposed to be the blue-collar party, the working-class party, the party that wanted peace, the party that wanted...
It was never these things. Like, okay, in the 1960s, you know, with, like, the Great Society stuff, and even a little bit before that with, like, the New Deal and stuff, they sort of ended up in that position, and they sort of realized that you could pretty much, like, dominate U.S. federal politics for good by just being the party that was both the, like, party of your, like, factory worker types and your party of your, like, Jim Crow KKK types, depending on which part of the country you were in. And you could shut out the Republicans completely. But that was also in a very specific historical moment when they, for one thing, were in a position to, like, placate workers rather than just, like, fucking browbeating us into oblivion. And also in a position, I would add, that to, where they had to actually show the world, you know, they had to, like, somehow prove that they had better living standards, that life in the U.S. was better than the Soviet Union, so that people would think that the U.S. was the model to follow and not the Soviet Union and stuff. And so all these things led to a situation where the Democrats, and to a greater extent than people realize, the Republicans were willing to be, like, a part of all sorts of, like, fairly piss weak by international standards, but still better than we've got now, welfare state programs.
American jobs and so on. It is so far from that now, rather like the British so-called Labour Party. Is it time to call it a day for the American masses with the Democratic Party?
Well, it's interesting because we're hearing some Democratic Party voices saying it's time to change their strategy, that they need to stop telling American workers that they're voting against their own interests in a condescending way.
Well, I mean, yeah, except that which is already just silly, because, like, they're literally voting against their interests either way. Like, so the issue isn't that they are telling people that they're voting against their own interests. It's worth noting, again, working people are not the, like, bulk of the Republican voting base. The working class either votes for the Democrats for the most part or doesn't vote. But there's literally no way to vote in your economic interest in this electoral system.
Need to look into what working class values in America really are. But that said,
well, I mean, that's an interesting and totally on-brand way of saying that they should, like, be more racist and throw trans people under the bus.
My concern is about Inauguration Day, because we saw what happened the last time Donald Trump was inaugurated.
Yeah, and that was great. That absolutely fucking rocked. And, I mean, I've heard people say that, you know, like, Trump just doesn't want to be in the cold or whatever, that he moved it on. I don't buy that. He understands images. And he does not want a situation where a photographer can photograph him and protesters in the same frame on Inauguration Day.
There was a huge amount of violence in the streets of Washington, D.C., and that there are sections of the American intelligence apparatus that are hoping to weaken the Trump presidency with
Oh, wait, so he's saying that all the protesters were CIA?
Violent provocations. I am concerned about security in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. I'm going to be in D.C., my organization.
Oh, well, I mean, maybe somebody will kick his ass.
For political innovation. We will be there engaging with Trump supporters. We have a banner of Trump and Kim Jong-un shaking hands.
I mean, this is just so... Here he goes with this bullshit.
Says only peace can make America great again. We're going to engage with Trump supporters.
Like, what's the point of this? I mean, like, who is falling for this crap?
About opposing imperialism and building peace around the world. We're having an event, a reception that evening in Washington, D.C. But, you know, we're going to be there to engage with those who voted for Trump because they want peace. But
that's, like, basically nobody, though. Like, so you're just going to be engaging with yourselves.
Very concerned about what the Answer Coalition, led by Brian Becker, is planning. They have staged and got permits for a decade.
I mean, I'm concerned with it because they always manage to bottle up all the energy and turn it into a boring A to B march when the situation is so far past that bullshit.
That is taking place on that day, and they say it's going to be peaceful, but we saw...
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's the Answer Coalition. They're practically deputy sheriffs. Like, if it gets to be any kind of legitimate resistance, rather than just a little fucking walk past some bored cops, then that's not going to be down to Answer. That's going to be down to the fact that Answer claims responsibility for huge protests, but what they do, and they're not alone in this, lots of these large groups do this, they will monopolize the permits and then take credit for all the people who showed up, as if, you know, everybody who's there to protest the inauguration would only have shown up if Answer had called it, which is just nonsense.
What happened last time Trump took office, the cars that were torched, the people that were injured, the many young people who were caught up in that and arrested, and if Brian...
it's funny how he has repeatedly called for, like, pardons for the, you know, neo-Nazis who staged the most pathetic coup attempt in recent memory on January 6th. But, like, the protesters, like, people were facing 60 years in prison just for being at a protest on January 20th, 2016. And he didn't have shit to say about it. Now he's like smearing them and claiming they're CIA.
Becker and the Answer Coalition are to be responsible. They need to cancel this demonstration. People voted for Trump because they want to make peace around...
You know they fucking didn't.
...the world. Donald Trump...
Like, why would anyone vote for Donald Trump because of that? That's not his thing.
...was elected on a platform of getting the USA out of the Ukraine conflict, and he's opposed by the foreign policy establishment.
Like, not really. I mean, he's opposed in much the same way that there are these epic, like, shit fights in WWE or whatever. But, like, the things that Trump actually did that deviated from sort of the conventional foreign affairs wisdom in the U.S. were things that were more confrontational. He took a way more confrontational stance against Russia than the U.S. had previously taken. He tore up a bunch of nuclear treaties, disarmament treaties with Russia. He was the one who breached the taboo of sending weapons to fucking Ukraine. Like... It is so trivial to just point out why there is absolutely no reason to believe that any of this is going to happen. It is such nonsense.
And we know.
And, like, the great thing is it pisses off libs to point it out, too, because a lot of liberals have had this idea that, that he must have been, like, totally looking for, like, peace with Russia and stuff like that. You know, all the Russiagate shit that was massively exaggerated. But the reality is he took a more aggressive stance, anti-Russian stance than his predecessors. And his successor, Biden, just continued on in that vein.
This demonstration they are planning is going to be utilized by provocateurs, by Antifa elements to try...
By Antifa elements?
...and taint the Trump presidency.
Wow, I mean, you would never want to to taint the Trump presidency. I mean, such a great, beautiful, pure thing. Yeah, I mean, also, I don't want to hear the words taint and Trump in the same place. Okay?
What were the overheard words by the Nazi child masturbating in the bathroom?
With violence. The Answer Coalition needs to cancel their demonstration that is taking...
Yeah, I mean, it would be really interesting if they did, just because you'd see how many people showed up anyway, because most people aren't going for Answer.
On Trump's inauguration. They need to...
Well, I mean, it's just hilarious that they're still calling themselves that, too. I mean, they're one of the various, like, groups that became really prominent in the failed anti-war movement that was meant to stop the U.S. invasion of Iraq, which they still act as some sort of great success, even though the movement to stop the invasion of Iraq kind of didn't stop the invasion of Iraq. Because, of course, it didn't, because there was absolutely no fucking plan to escalate it. There was just, like, a bunch of people walk down the street in fucking D.C., and then they go home, and then they get all fucking shocked Pikachu when it turns out that that didn't give anyone pause.
Call it off so that they cannot facilitate the provocative actions being planned by the pro-NATO faction of the...
Oh, yeah, right. Because if there's one group of people who are really pro-NATO, it's like people who like to beat up Nazis.
Let's recall that John Bolton, who served in Trump's administration, said that if Donald Trump was ever elected and ever took office...
Like, John Bolton, for fuck's sake, one of the, like, kings of neo-connery. Like, that's why it's so ridiculous for me to be like, you know, Trump needs to... People voted for Trump because he's for peace. And it's like, John Bolton...
Again, the USA would leave the NATO alliance. I hope John Bolton is right. We need to leave the NATO alliance.
Yeah, but that wasn't what he was talking about. He wasn't talking about leaving NATO for, like, the based reason that NATO shouldn't exist. He was talking about leaving NATO because NATO, like, all the NATO subalterns, all the NATO lieutenants that the U.S. has, they other than, like, Britain... said when the U.S. said, you gotta come and help us, you know, invade Iraq, they all said, no, fuck that, that's a bad idea. And so John Bolton said, you know, we just need to get rid of NATO and, you know, have coalitions of the willing every time we need to go off and, like, murder people and steal their shit.
And the opposition to Trump is coming from the foreign policy establishment. This isn't a guarantee that Trump is going to do good things.
John Bolton is the fucking foreign policy establishment.
But if there's any possibility of things improving, it means that those of us who want U.S. relations around the world and the U.S. wars all across the planet to de-escalate, we need to loudly support any positive action that Donald Trump might take. So,
any action that he might take. Well, I mean, he's not going to.
So, my hope is that the Answer Coalition, which claims to be an anti-war organization, will cancel their demonstration.
Oh, God, I mean, it would be so pathetic if they do that just because Caleb Muppet says so.
Rally that is basically going to become a space for provocateurs working on behalf of NATO.
I mean, I thought it was hilarious when the idea was that people who didn't like Nazis in their community were paid protesters in, like, the pay of Soros. But now he's suggesting that the people who are opposing the U.S. government are in the pay of NATO, a military alliance controlled by the U.S. government. Like, yeah, explain to me how that works.
To destabilize Washington, D.C. If they are truly anti-war, they need to cancel their demonstration. That is my call for the Answer Coalition, for the Palestine activists. They need to call...
Why the fuck would the Palestine activists call it off? Like, Trump has made it clear he is just as genocidal as Biden.
Call off the provocative demonstration planned for...
I see. I'm so glad that basically nobody's going to listen to this, Jabroni. Except for, like, the 20 people in his cult.
Inauguration day.
They've tried everything.
I mean, he has It's such an understanding of how power works.
With Trump. They tried lawfare to put him in jail. They've tried assassins to murder him.
Who's they? That was actually the two incompetent assassination attempts were both, like, fash. They were both, like, Trump supporters who had soured on him.
Is he out of the woods now? I mean, can he go for a round of golf without a fear of someone in the trees?
How the fuck would Caleb Maupin know?
Well,
what's the point of asking him? Like, how the fuck would he know what Trump's personal security situation is or isn't?
I can only hope that Donald Trump will take positive moves. There's talk of a meeting with the Russians.
And he understands how ridiculous it is to ask him that question because he didn't even answer it.
President being in the works. There is talk of restarting peace on the Korean Peninsula.
There is talk, which is to say, he's been like pretending that that's what Trump did the last time.
That said, if there's not loud public support for Donald Trump anytime he does take,
you gotta clap. Trump as like sort of Nazi Tinkerbell. You gotta clap and say you do believe in him.
Good moves. We don't have to support him when he does bad things, but if he does good things and starts trying to make peace around the world,
which he's not gonna do,
trying to improve the lives of working families,
which he's not gonna do,
stands up and challenges.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why he's decided to just stop pretending to be a communist. Because, the level of, class analysis-lessness that you need in order to think that a literal billionaire gives a shit about the working class.
FBI, which he has promised to do. Kash Patel, who he's put in charge of the FBI, is a long-term critic of the FBI, a defender of American civil liberties. If Donald Trump moves against the FBI, if Donald Trump moves to restrict and de-escalate wars around the world.
Well, why are you talking? I mean, and what if maybe Donald Trump will team up with Kirby, the red fluffball thing, and give everybody chocolate and trans-inclusive vibrator equipment. But, and if he does that, we should all celebrate. But the thing is, dude, he's not gonna. I mean, we can all make up wonderful Trump policies that we should all celebrate if he did them, if we're not, at all tied to reality. I think that, I just gotta be real here, folks. If Trump decides to give queer people paid time off to learn how better to finger their partners, I think we all need to celebrate that action. Which is about as probable as any of the other fucking shit that he's just said.
We have to loudly support him in doing so. And the woke left have basically just turned themselves into a vehicle through which the pro-NATO establishment can antagonize Donald Trump.
Who does he think NATO is? Trump is going to be in charge of fucking NATO.
And they should not do that. If you want peace around the world.
Trump says, fucking Caleb Muppet says that, leftists ought to do what he says and, suck up to Trump rather than, defending the working class, which I'm sure we're all seriously considering it, Caleb.
World, we need to support any positive moves that can happen. Look, I think there is potential for peace in Palestine.
I think so too. Not because of anything fucking Trump does, but because Israel has gotten wrecked. Their economy's fucked. Their diplomatic situation is disastrous. The country is an absolute pariah. It has never been this thoroughly delegitimized in its history by its own actions. Even if all of a lot, they're gonna have to come clean about how many fucking goons they lost in the genocide in Gaza at some point. And that's going to be a hell of a moment because they've been lying about that the whole time. Israel's fucked. Israel does not have a long future at this point. I seriously doubt it. And I think actually, not because Trump is going to do anything good, but because now, now the official face of the Gaza genocide is about to be Donald Trump rather than Joe Biden. And that means liberals aren't going to be making excuses for it anymore. The ones who were, which is a lot of them. Because because Trump says the quiet part out loud, even when it is a completely bad idea, because Trump's a fucking loose cannon and he likes to hear himself talk and he doesn't really give a shit. So, yeah, I see that. I think there's a real possibility there, but it has absolutely nothing to do with thinking that Trump's going to do anything good. It has to do with the fact that Israel has, absolutely run its course at this point. The place is fucking falling apart.
Because Donald Trump wants to be remembered as a peacemaker.
No, he doesn't.
Because he wrote the art of the deal, he likes to be remembered.
Who gives a shit if he wrote a book in the 1980s that nobody read?
And thought of as a deal maker. I think there's potential.
Well, no, he likes to be thought of as a guy who manages to come up with deals that only he benefits from, even when they're a complete disaster for literally every other party.
For positive action from the Trump White House, even though Trump talks as if he is more...
This is, and let me just say, any liberals who, accidentally click on this and watch this far, first of all, that's neat. Thank you for watching this far. But for another thing, this is what, fucking liberal commentators sound like when they were talking about, Joe Biden and all the wonderful things he was likely to do, as if he didn't have a 50-year fucking track record from which we could figure out what he was likely to do. This is what they sounded like. And this is Caleb Muppet doing the exact same thing.
Pro-Israel than Biden is. I think there's potential because Trump wants to be remembered as a great leader.
How the fuck does he know what Trump wants to be remembered as?
A great leader would not continue to give Israel license.
Oh, because see, if Trump wants to be remembered as a great leader, he must mean he wants to be remembered as what Caleb Maupin thinks a great leader is. Because really what Trump wants is to be remembered fondly by Caleb Maupin or something.
Bomb and murder Palestinians. A great leader would move toward peace in...
Okay, a great leader would do all sorts of shit, but this one won't.
In the Middle East.
Fascinating.
Even fucking George Galloway is listening to this. A grifter that he is, and he's got nothing he could possibly say because he's just heard this long stream of consciousness Donald Trump fucking fanfic.
Caleb Maupin, thanks for joining us on Having It Out with Galloway.
Okay, so that's that. Well, we haven't...
so I saw the new...
No, we already saw that you saw it. So, okay, we haven't got much time left, but I'm gonna just check out... Tim Pool is really worked up about TikTok. Admittedly, some months too late since it's already getting fucking banned. And, if you didn't... Let me just remind people, I have this other stream that is just all, language stuff. And it turns out, I keep on hearing a lot of people have started, learning Chinese out of spite because they want to join in the nation state grade fucking Streisand effect that is the TikTok ban, and so they're just going straight over to the OG version of the TikTok. And so on my language stream this afternoon, one of the things we looked at was free surprising language learning resources. Fuck, that's a long link. Resources for learning Chinese. Comprehensible input stuff. It's towards the last hour.
I don't want Chinese interests to have a control over parts of our economy, be it farmland, be it TikTok, be it Hollywood.
And let's just remember that the idea that TikTok was controlled by China is based on the idea that the owners of TikTok are from Singapore, and people in Singapore look sort of similar. It's just pure nonsense.
And we can start with TikTok and other platforms they try to introduce, and it's going to be a game of whack-a-mole, but I do think it's important that we do it.
What if the information was correct?
Okay. Fine, who cares?
Hey, who cares? Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, Tim Pool's listeners, that's great. You just heard it. You got it from the horse's ass right there. What if the information's accurate? Who cares?
Well, if you're blocking them because... If you're blocking this country, or insert any other country, if you're blocking the information from coming in that could potentially be correct, then we don't have the ability to see the correct information.
Well, yeah, and since when does Tim Pool give a shit about that? Like, he's never been the correct information guy.
That's you consume Facebook and text North Korea, and we have no means to do shows like this.
Well, yeah, but I mean, as you just said, yeah, shows like this, you see, where the host, when he's asked, like, what if
what
if the information's correct, and he says, who cares, because he actually literally does not give a shit whether the information's correct or not.
Assuming that the only place you can get the correct information is that one specific app. The apps... Yeah, okay, so I would... Especially... Well, I think that's kind of unlikely.
I can end this debate right now.
Oh, really? This should be interesting.
How many followers do you have on YouTube?
5,100.
How many followers do you have on Twitter?
5,000 something, 5,500.
How many followers do you have on TikTok?
155,000. That doesn't solve anything. I make video content. Video content does not vertical.
You're arguing for the platform where you have a following.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what's going on. Thank you for noticing that. And Tim Pool doesn't have a following there, so he doesn't give a shit. And in fact, the fact that there's like a likelihood of getting accurate information from TikTok, because it is not so fully integrated into the U.S. propaganda system, actually is a threat to him.
Oh. No, it has nothing to do. No, that is not true.
I mean, it is true, and it's not wrong.
And it's a false equivalency. It's a false equivalency to suggest that my opinion is biased simply because my content works there. For you to presume that that's the case, it is incorrect. There's nothing to lead.
You make an assumption,
you can make an assumption, but it's a false assumption.
Yeah, but I mean, when does that ever stop Tim Pool?
Follow that on TikTok.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. But that's
kind of false equivalent. I feel like
basically you're saying that you're saying I'm only arguing because I want to benefit myself.
Well, yeah, that's why you're all there. I mean, that's the only reason you're at this particular trough. You're not doing it because it makes you good people. You're not doing it because it's gonna get you fucking remembered fondly or achieve anything good for the world. There's just a shitload of money around this particular trough.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you could presume that, but that's not the case.
Like, if I had no followers on Twitter, I don't think you read the bill. I don't think you know what's in the law.
I mean, among other things, people trying to get around the censorship could face very lengthy prison terms.
I can't recite it back and forth right now. It's been a long time since it came out.
You're arguing for your platform.
I'm not arguing for my platform.
I mean, let's just say it's legitimate to argue for your platform. We have a... I mean, if, like, occasionally Tim Pool has pretended to be really big on free speech. I mean, like, for a while, like, he would just go on these long rants about the censorship and how awful the censorship was and stuff like that. But now he's kind of cool with the censorship because it suits him. But that's where he always was.
No. I have more followers on Instagram than I do on TikTok.
All right, fair point.
And I don't care about TikTok.
We have almost no followers on TikTok because TikTok banned us like 5 times.
Right. Oh, well, yeah, because you're full of shit. So wait a second. TikTok. See, I thought he was about to. I was like halfway low key thinking, okay, I should check to see like how many is Tim Pool going to turn out to have like 1 billion fucking followers on TikTok or something, and that's his fucking trump card here. But no, and in fact, he just said, okay, so that he has no followers on TikTok because TikTok banned him 5 times because, you know, he lies and incites racist violence and stuff. And I just find that funny because he just got done saying, yeah, we can't listen to you because you got a lot of followers on TikTok, so obviously you're biased. Your argument can be discounted now. And I was sitting here, and when he was saying that, I was sure he was about to, like, say, look at all these fucking followers I got on TikTok, and I'm still in favor of banning the platform. And it turns out, no, his problem with TikTok is that he has no followers there because they banned him. Oh, Tim Pool.
And I don't like...
Stay classy. But, okay, it's time to wrap up. Thank you to everyone who joined in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope you join us next week at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time on Friday. Let me just say, there is a whole Discord, the link to which I'm about to give you if you want to keep in touch in between streams. If I can just find the fucking link, because Discord, the software, has made this difficult. Hell, where is it? Can anyone go to the Discord and copy the Discord link for this? Because for some reason the software will not do it properly for me. So if somebody in chat could do that, I would really appreciate it. Meanwhile, if you haven't heard about the Inès Armand translation project, that is a huge thing that I've been working on, translating the suppressed and completely untranslated works of the first head of the Bolshevik women's section, Kalantai's predecessor. Her work was suppressed under Stalin. It never got translated until now. And I'm trying to raise $8,500 to do it, to cover just the cost of translating and editing it and everything. So far, I've raised about 60% of that. But I'm looking to, cover the rest of that, and I would really appreciate any support, because that project is a real lifeline for me at the moment. So, and, details for that, you can go to my Patreon, or there's also, for one-off donations, get that link. And with that,